welcome to American Baker in Germany. I'm Michelle, and we are starting a Baking Basics series. Today we are going to learn how to line and grease a baking pan to get it ready for your batter. Let's go! Alright, I would like to talk about two different kinds of pans because I'm going to show you two different ways. I don't know what your pans look like, so I'm going to show you how you can do this with two different kinds of pans that I have. The first one I have here is a regular pan. It's pretty standard. Catch the light, there we go. That you can see has a bottom to it. The sides are a little bit slanted, but that's about it. This is a really basic standard pan that most kitchens will have. This one, however, is called a springform pan. If I turn it this way, you can see it has like a buckle on the side of it almost. And this is when it's closed. To open it, I just pull this in and the sides come off of the base. So that's a springform pan, and I will show you how to prepare both of those. These are both square pans, but you can do the same kind of a principle with a round pan. I have another springform pan here. It's a round springform pan. There's the buckle on the side, and you just pull to release. Pull it all the way open, and the bottom comes off. So those are a couple of different pans that I have. To put it back in case you've ever wondered that, you see that little groove on the side of this pan. See the groove? And you just place this part inside that groove. And try to hold it flat, because the other side isn't touching it yet. And you close it slowly until both sides touch, and then you can snap it back in place. Now if it's not quite flat, then you can adjust it. Just open again and try again, or adjust it a little bit. It really does work that way. So we will be preparing these pans today. So the first thing I do is the hardest part about baking a cake and just taking it out of the pan is that it tends to stick to the bottom of your pan. That's the number one place that it sticks to. So what I do, is I use a product called baking paper. It's also called parchment paper. So I just take a piece, and this piece is obviously too large for my pan. And no matter how big of a piece I took off, it would still be too large for this pan, because this pan is not as wide as the paper itself, which is perfectly normal. This is not meant to be the same size. So what I do is I put the pan onto the paper, line it up on one corner, yeah? In fact, let it overlap a little bit on that corner, and then you'll get a more accurate one. I'm taking some scissors. I'll pull this up a little bit so you can see what I'm doing on the other side of the pan, and I'm just going to cut the paper right next to the pan and on the top. Okay, so I'm going to start over here. You can't see this because I am way on the other side. If you need more room for your hand, you can pull it to one side if you need to. And I'm just going to continue cutting so that I don't have too much paper going on here. Now, that's pretty good, actually. Pretty close to how big I need it. I'm going to let it overlap just a touch on this side, because we don't want it to be too big. And then I'll cut it pretty close to the edge. If you want to, you can also measure the bottom of your pan to see how big it is. So here's my pan, and then I have this piece of parchment I just cut, and look at that. It fits in there just about perfectly. Okay, now that's putting the parchment paper in the bottom. I'm not done yet, so we will continue. Springform pan is actually even easier. Take the sides off, put your paper down, put the sides back on, squish it down a little. You can tend to need to press a little bit into it, because otherwise it tends to not be all the way in to the pan, the sides I mean. So there you go, but you do have this excess paper. You don't need that extra paper, so I'm just going to take my scissors and cut it off. both of our pans are lined with parchment paper. Now I'm going to show you how to grease them. There are also a couple of different ways to grease them, and you may find other ways than what I'm going to show you today. But the easiest way is if you have some sort of baking spray. That's what this is. So this is just spray, like oil, in like aerosol spray can. There are lots of different brands. I got mine online because it was cheaper, not because you can't find it elsewhere. So you can find it in a well-stocked baking section even in Germany. So I'm going to show you this first. All you do is shake the can until it gets a little bit cold up here on where your hand is. And then you just spray a nice even coat, and fairly generous as well. Yes, even on the parchment paper, because if you don't, then it could still stick to it, and we just don't want that. Plus, it keeps the parchment paper from moving around on the bottom quite so much. It now is sticky a little bit, and it will stick to the bottom. Well, it's greasy, so it is, and it helps it stick. So this one is completely ready now for batter. So let's put that one aside. I'm going to show you one other way. And this is just as legitimate if you don't have baking spray, which some people don't, or if you're out or whatever. There's another way. Now what I did is I just spooned a couple of spoonfuls of margarine into this little container. This is just regular old margarine, and it's nice and soft. You can see that squish, squish. Because I don't like putting my hands into a package of margarine I'm going to like spread onto bread or something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fingers. This looks really gross if you don't like touching butter. And it does get your hands a little dirty. And make sure your hands are washed before you do this, please. But you take a chunk of butter on your fingers. You could also use more than one finger. Okay, I'm just trying to demonstrate it. And then all you're going to do is squish the butter and spread it around the bottom and the sides. Make sure you get the sides. That's actually more important than the bottoms with the parchment paper. So I'm going to go ahead and get the bottom first, and then we'll get the sides really nice and thoroughly. Okay. And more butter, a little more than that actually. Okay. And then you butter up the sides like this. As far up as you can get, really. You don't have to go all the way to the top, since your cake is unlikely to go all the way to the top, but it's always a good idea to have more instead of less. So there we go. It's nice and greasy, and that's how you grease a pan. And after that, you really need to wash your hands. But that's basically how you prepare your pans. Now we have 2 prepared pans for batter. Alright, one more thing that I forgot to mention is sometimes you have funny shaped pans, like this one. This is a bundt pan. That's just the shape and what it's called. And it has like these funny little design in the bottom. And this is also springform though. And then I have this pan. This is a butterfly pan. It's silicone. But the problem with these kind of pans is you can't put parchment paper on the bottom of these. So what you have to do is make sure that you grease them really, really well. I'm not going to grease them today because I'm not using them today, but I have used them in the past, and you can use either method. Just make sure you add a little bit extra than you otherwise would. I put a relatively thin coat of butter on the bottom of the other pan and a relatively thin coat of spray. If you're using a pan with some sort of design, you want to put extra spray in there or extra butter. So just make sure you get all the little holes, little nooks and crannies. And you can't use parchment paper on these, so that's just a trick. However, a pan like this, you could theoretically use parchment paper around the circles on the inside of the outside. And I'll show you just a general idea of how you do that. You get a little piece of parchment paper and you fold it in half, because you're not going to need to be super tall. And you just tuck it around like this. Now that you'd need the longer one for this one, but that's the idea. Okay, so that's something you could do to help it not to stick to the centers or the side. But the top, or the bottom, I guess, the bottom of the pan, which will be the top once you take it out, you would have to just grease really, really well. All right, I hope that was helpful. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial today, and we'll see you again next time.